It's time for the Kim Hammer Show, where you'll learn how your state government affects you, your family, and community. Here's Kim Hammer.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Kim Hammer Show on, again, another beautiful Saturday. It is the opening day of muzzle loading, so we hope that the deer hunters are being successful out in the woods, and also be careful as it's going to shake up the deer a little bit. If you're driving around, they might get a little bit more spooky after today. And so we just want to wish our hunters that are out enjoying muzzle loading a good day, and hopefully it's a good day for you. Our sponsors of the Kim Hammer Show are Everett GMC Buick down Saline County on I-30 there at Alcoa exit. Excellent place to go in order to get a new GMC Buick product or a certified pre-owned vehicle. They can take care of you on all your service needs, as I tell you. You go in there on Saturday or any morning, you're going to be treated to a nice little continental breakfast there, including the donuts, the coffee, the juices, the cappuccinos, and everything else. You got a great waiting room that you can keep your phone plugged up and charged up, get the Wi-Fi and everything else. You can do your work from there while you get your car serviced, and you can get in and out of there really quick, but also you get good quality service there at Everett GMC Buick in Saline County on I-30. Also, Baxley Penfield Mouty Real Estate. As I always tell you, they can and they are, and they will take care of your real estate needs, whether it's buying or selling in the residential or commercial line. They've got a lot of commercial property in their inventory down there. So if you're looking to buy or sell either commercial or rental, they can take care. Commercial or residential, they can take care of you. And if you're looking for rental property, they even have a division. They'll take care of that. So just encourage you to call Baxley Penfield Mouty or go up and check them out on their website, located in Saline County there at Highway 5 and Spring Hill Road. Easy in, easy out. Then Edwards Food Store, which includes Edwards Food Store and Edwards Cash Savers, located here in Central Arkansas. Over in East Arkansas, I was in there doing my shopping this morning, and I got to tell you, the produce looked like it had just come out of the garden. Their meat market was superb. I don't know if they got the cows out back and doing it fresh or what, but the meat market is great. They've got that 5 for $19.95 deal where you can get 5 items for less than $20. Their store is clean, well stocked. The prices are great. And the one thing I liked, I took my wife breakfast this morning. You can go in there and you can get the sausage gravy, or you can get the plain gravy, the milk gravy, the brown gravy, what are like homemade biscuits. And you can get eggs, either scrambled or scrambled with cheese. You get the sausage, the bacon. They've got it all. And it was less than if I'd bought it myself and took it home and fixed it. Plus, I scored a lot of good brownie points with my wife, so that doesn't hurt either. So I want to thank the sponsors that make the Kim Hammer Show possible. Remember, a little housekeeping. The comments expressed on the show are either mine and mine alone, or that of my guest that we have in the studio, so please keep that in mind. And on today's topic, if you want to call in, you can call into 501-823-0965, 501-823-0965. I want to point out also one of my sponsors, Everett. If you're watching on the Facebook Live, you'll notice that their logo is there. But I want to draw your attention to the other one. It is Faithful to the Fatherless. Just a little plug that this past week, Second Chance Ranch, which is located out in Perrin, which is a great environment for kids that are taken into DHS custody and the foster care system. They have a great organization out there. In fact, I'm going to have them on in the next few weeks to talk about their program out there. And it is something that we need to give attention to because, as my guest may lend credit to, in this difficult time that we're living in, every segment of our society is under additional stress, and that can include in the home environment, and that makes it tough on kids, and it also makes it tough on parents, and just the cases of abuse where DHS is having to step in and take custody of some kids can be a real challenging time, and finding a good, safe environment can also be a challenging time. So wanted to promote Second Chance Ranch, but you notice that the little wall placard that I have on display here, I picked that up Tuesday night at the Faithful to the Fatherless event sponsored by Second Chance Ranch. And this was made by Caden. And I wanted to mention this because I think some of them may be watching. It's a beautiful piece of art. But also down there in the bottom right-hand corner is a young girl named Ivy, and she's the one that we're praying for, along with all the other kids. But each one of us got one of these at our table, and it had the name of a child that they asked us to pray for. So, Ivy, if you're watching, I want you to know that we in the listening audience are praying for you and all the other kids out there, and also to say to Caden, thank you for doing such a wonderful job making this. I'm going to actually hang this in my office at the state capitol, and so I want you to know where it's going to go because it's something that I want people to be mindful of and also to keep at the forefront of our attention. Today on the Kim Hammer Show is Angela Campagna.
Campagna. You got it
I got
right.
it right. That's cool. Step up, or not step up, but scoot
Yeah,
up to the mic a little closer
sure.
there, Angela. I'm going to let Angela tell a little bit about herself because as she speaks and she shares about her background, we'll get into the topic of today, which is talking about mental health. We're going to talk specifically about that is offered to veterans along the lines of dealing with suicidal issues, but we're also going to get off into the issue of mental health as it affects our nation today under the COVID situation and the changes in lifestyle that we've had today and a lot of other topics. If you got a question or a comment, you can call into 501-823-0965 if you'd like to. But Angela, just for the listening audience, if you will, just go ahead and give us a little history so people can be comfortable with you.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I grew up in a rural area called Fox, Arkansas, up in Stone County. For those of you that don't know that area, I joined the Marine Corps when I was 18 years old. I served in the Marine Corps for 9 years. That was an amazing experience for me, very eye-opening. I learned a lot, and that's when I first started to get very curious about mental health, and not just mental health in a negative way. I think we have a stereotype when we talk about mental health that it's always a negative thing, but it was actually more of a positive growth, and I could just see how with the right supports, the right motivation, people could just overcome, very, very difficult things. I discharged from the Marine Corps and met my husband, and that's when I went on to pursue my degree. I have a master's degree in clinical social work from University of Southern California. I later became a licensed clinical social worker. I have a daughter. We ended up moving back to Arkansas about 3 years ago, and we chose to live in Conway, Arkansas, because there are many reasons. I love Conway. But one huge thing was our faith, and we are Catholic, and we attend St. Joseph there, and my daughter has gone to school there. So for me, that's something that I learned for my own mental health, that spirituality and being connected to that type of support can be very effective and helpful in getting you through difficult times. I now have a private therapy practice in Conway called Face to Face Therapy. I have a podcast called Crazy Talk Podcast. And with that podcast, our goal is to break stigma and to get real factual information about mental health out to the public. That everything about social work is me, like it's my true calling. And social workers really believe in the person in the environment and how our environment can either hinder us or support us. And I like that you just brought up the Second Chance Ranch. That's a perfect example that you may have a child in an environment where they can't be successful, but if you can get them those supports around them, they can grow and they can succeed. I'm also starting a business on subscription boxes because I know during COVID it's been harder to get out and do a lot of some of our normal um, ways of coping with things and socializing and sporting events and concerts, et cetera, et cetera. And then, like you brought up, the people in the nursing home that just really can't leave at all or in the hospitals. So I wanted to create a little box of something I call something extra that you can help manage your emotions and your mental health with that packaged all together.
So, subscription boxes, explain that concept or
Mm-hmm.
talk a little deeper on that, what that is.
Sure. So the idea there's tons of subscription boxes out there right now. Um, but the one that I'm trying to do is each couple months you would sign up and you would get a box in the mail from me. And also I'm including in that a 30-minute consultation with me. So you don't have to necessarily need therapy or um, be diagnosed with something to use this box. It's just something to help you self care. So it might have some lotions and some candles and other things that are relaxing, but I would show you how to use that. Like, for an example, a lot of people struggle with sleep, even more so now during COVID. So there's a lot of natural ways to promote healthy sleep besides taking medication, which if you need medication, I'm totally supportive of that too. But like a sleep hygiene. So your body needs to know when it's time to rest. So I would teach you and give you the tools to help you create that sleep routine to promote better sleep, which leads to better mental and physical health.
The your interest in the Marine Corps. Let me back up and ask you
Sure.
this. So, what years were you in the Marine Corps?
Oh man, you're gonna get me talking about my age.
No, just give me a date.
So I went into the Marine Corps in 1996.
So, what was it like?
Yeah.
Let me ask you because I mean that within itself probably in my mind would seem like a mental strain. I mean, a lady going into the Marine Corps in 1996. Just curious, what was that environment like? Because you were you on the
Yeah.
pioneer breakthrough time of that happening, or had that?
Well, women were in the military already, but things were very different back then. And we have some Marine Corps jokes, that so many things have changed now that it's, I hate to say, easier.
Mhm.
So we like to give, the new Marines, we like to talk crap to them a little
Okay.
bit, you know what I mean? Because it was much harder when we went through.
Yeah.
But if you think, I don't know if Fox, Arkansas is a very small town. I graduated with 12 or 13 people in my class. I had never been on an airplane or never stayed in a hotel. So my parents were shocked when I actually left. So that was my first time on an airplane. First time really, I think maybe I'd left the state once before. But it's a real eye-opening, shocking experience. And I tell people a lot of times the reason I made it is I was too afraid to fail. you know. But they demand growth in you. And when you actually get in there, it's very clear, even though they're very, very demanding physically, mentally, and emotionally. They want you to succeed, and you know that. And so that made me think if you are working for someone and supervising someone or being someone's therapist, you want them to succeed and you have to build them the skills. And that's what they do in the Marine Corps. When I went into the Marine Corps, I think it's still the same way. Women and men are totally separated. So we don't see the opposite sex for like 3 months, period. So I think that's something that the Marine Corps still holds on to. And I went to Paris Island. That's the only place that female Marines train. Men are in San Diego and Paris Island, South Carolina, but women only there. And I remember when I was like a sergeant in the Marine Corps, and you can look because you can see you want to get promoted. So, you want to know who your competition is.
Mhm.
There was only total like 100 females at that rank in the whole Marine Corps. So it was very small. Most places I served, I would be one of the only females.
Okay. On a personal level, I graduated with 18 from Southside B Branch. So
Okay.
yeah, I can relate to that small school
Yeah.
environment, and
Yeah.
that was a big step, for you to take going from where you were growing
Sure.
up over into the Marine Corps. So as you were in the Marine Corps, what was it you mentioned this a while ago that actually got you started thinking along the lines of wanting to become a therapist? What is it that
Hmm.
triggered you to decide that this was your calling, that
Hmm.
you wanted to devote yourself to helping military personnel as well as others in
Hmm.
life, but with your focus on the military?
Yeah. Well, you know, the Marine Corps, they can push you mentally to where you can succeed in situations that you believe you can't. And that was the first interest in me. And they build you a team of a family of such a strong support that you can be successful in so many ways. And I really feel that our whole society could learn a lot from that. Um, I then, of course, later on, after 9/11 happened, the day that 9/11 happened, I was in Washington, D.C., preparing to go out of the country. And that was a real eye opener for me. All of our flights got delayed for weeks. We were shut down. I ended up getting, I would say 2 weeks after 9/11, sent to Kazakhstan, a very remote place where it was like me and five other guys in charge of protecting an embassy. And We went through some very isolated, scary times, but we made it, and we were positive and we had the right resources. But I would always think back to people back in Arkansas. Um, this is my home. I've always wanted to come back here. And I think about little girls who are in school in Fox, Arkansas, and other rural areas who might think that they don't have that opportunity, but they do. And I want to make sure that they all know that they can be successful. They can go from rural poverty, Arkansas, and become a business owner and advocating on radio stations with senators. They should know if that's in their heart that they can do that and getting them the right supports. So that's why specifically social work was so important to me because we do different things. We're often the ones that go into the homes and say, this is not working out with the children. What do we need to do to make this a successful environment? Then I had tons of, my brother Marines serving in combat zones, losing legs, losing arms, saw the effects of PTSD coming back home, families getting torn apart, you know, and I wanted to learn and learn and learn and see how can we solve this problem. And so that's where I first applied to graduate school. They were like, well, what do you want to do? You write a paper on what do you want to do? I'm like, veterans with PTSD. And they're like, Angela, that's great, but that's not enough. Like, you need to be open to do more. You can't that's not going to solve the problem, right? And that's how then you get into the advocacy and all the different types of therapies and always staying on top of that. I hope that answered your question a
It
little bit.
it does, and right now, that's a perfect segue in because I've got Senator Trent Garner on the phone, and Senator Garner is going to join us for part of our time together today because he was very instrumental recently in helping secure. I think it was Trent. You can straighten me out, but I think it was $5 million out of the CARES Act money in order to be devoted to help veterans. Especially, I know he has a strong interest in helping with suicide prevention among the military family. So, Senator Trent Garner, who's on the campaign trail, thank you for calling in today. I'm not sure if you're in El Dorado or what part of your district you're in, but I appreciate you very much joining us on the Kim Hammer Show today.
Well, thanks so much, Kim, and thank you to your guest. I was listening to her right before I came on, and sound like some sincere words. Somebody wants to help a veteran. Yeah, so I'm in El Dorado today. We're out here doing an event and out in my car to be able to talk about veterans. Anytime I get a chance to talk about veterans issues, I jump on it unless there's an absolute reason not to. But yeah, if you want to dive into the details of that CARES Act money now, we can, or kind of how do you want to kind of direct this, Kim?
Well, go ahead and get started because I want people to know that how that money is being used and what good resources that money is going to be put towards. So go ahead and give the background on the money.
Perfect. So one of the things we realized, I put together a task force that is studying veteran suicide-related issues, and we had multiple meetings before COVID-19 hit, and unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we had to shut that down for a while. And so we had our first real meeting after the post-COVID time frame about a month ago. And at that meeting, we had the people from the Department of Veteran Affairs, people who do mental health crisis across the state with veterans. And I asked them point blank if COVID-19 had affected our veteran suicide rate. And they said unequivocally, yes, it's been a negative impact. They can't get the care. They're isolated. They're stressed. There's all kind of issues. In fact, the predictions are 25% more suicide attempts and successful suicides since COVID-19 hit. When that happened, I thought that we need to take action to make sure we stop that. That is too many of our veterans. And so we had the Federal Care Act money given to us by President Trump and our federal delegation. And that money's been used in various different ways. But I couldn't think of a better way to use that money than to help our veterans. And fortunately, my colleagues in the Senate and the House passed a appropriation this yesterday, that will put $5 million toward helping veterans in direct and positive ways. $3.4 million will go to nonprofits across the state. I'm sure you and your listeners, Kim, know many nonprofits who help veterans, and they'll actually be able to apply for that grant in an expedited manner and get money to help veterans and to help those nonprofits. The nonprofits are kind of like the lifeline during this COVID-19 world. $600,000 will go to help our community health centers do better education, and that will affect all 75 counties across the state. and $1 million would go to our crisis stabilization units. These are units that are set up to kind of be a in between, somebody going to jail and somebody having to go to get mental health. They're actually set up for people who are in that crisis situation so that police can interact with them and get them the treatment and need. This will allow $1 million more dollars for those places so they can directly help veterans who are in a crisis situation, whether it's suicide attempts, whether they need some other kind of help. This will go directly to help veterans. And ultimately, as I'm sure your guest knows, and as you know, Kim, this will go to help veterans and make sure they save lives. This will actually make a noticeable difference in that front.
With regards to what you see in the veterans world, because Angela has some interest in that too, as far as the services that are currently offered, what do you see as, and take a minute and just tell people about your service time, because I want them to understand that you are relating from the inside out, not the outside in. I never served in the military. That's always one of my regrets. Of course, you always wonder how it would have changed your life as far as the spouse you met and all that stuff. But this is my way of making up for it in trying to be supportive of the veterans. So tell folks a little bit about your background, because I think it gives perspective to your interest in helping veterans.
Absolutely. Kim, I grew up in a military family. My dad was actually full-time National Guard. And so at an early age, he kind of taught me about service to others. And that's why when I was still in high school, I joined the Arkansas National Guard when I was 17 years old. And I went to basic training the summer of 2001. And I think everybody here knows what happened that next September. Had that sense of service kind of drag at me and pull at me. And so got honorably discharged from the Arkansas National Guard and went through Special Forces Green Beret training, some of the hardest training in the military on the earth, and trained for about 2.5 years. Fortunately, got through that training and earned my Green Beret hat and tab. And then it did 2 combat tours to Afghanistan where we saw heavy combat, great military service. I was happy to give back and go after those that attacked us. What I found out is after my military time, I did a little time in the reserves during college, but, I saw a lot of veterans that I had served with, or people I knew who were veterans, or people I knew when I was in the National Guard were having trouble and issue. I'm very fortunate that I never was in a situation that gave me post-traumatic stress syndrome or any kind of real injuries. But believe me, with the job I was doing, I know a lot of good men and women who did. And I always say this, I think this, Kim, being a preacher, but for the grace of God, there goes I, which is basically if things had worked out just a little bit different, I could be that veteran who's sitting at home, who's physically hurt or disabled, or a veteran who has those post-traumatic stress syndrome. And so when I ran for election, one of my key platforms was helping our veterans here in the state. And I've done everything I can to try to help them to get over that hump because, we got to say in the military, we never leave a man behind. And unfortunately, in Arkansas and across the United States, we were leaving a lot of good men and women behind. And I made that an effort to do it. We still have a long way to go, but I can say today that we were moving one step closer to reaching that mission statement. And that makes me proud. And it's really an honor that I serve with men like Kim and other men and women who care a lot about our veterans. Our General Assembly and government in the state of Arkansas do a lot for them, and I can say they genuinely care. And that's always a positive thing serving in this capacity.
So let me ask you and Angela together, and we got 2 minutes before I got to take a break. And if you got to go, I understand. If you can hang on through the break, it's about 2 minutes. I'll have you come back out on the other side of the break. But just kind of be positive, but also be honest. What are some things, first of all, that y'all see? I'm going to ask Angela because I know she works, with the veterans also. What are some things you see that we really ought to be doing better as far as helping our veterans? Or what are some things you talk to us as lawmakers and tell us, what do you think are some things we need to be focusing on with regards to veteran affairs? And
Yeah, I know that one problem is that there are so many veterans that come back and they go back home to these very rural areas. And in the rural areas, it's very hard to get down to McClellan or these other veteran facilities. I know we have some other sort of smaller satellite things, but I think it's very hard to get connected. So I wish that there could be more reach out or more options for them that realistically, if they can't go to the VA, they maybe can have insurance or some type of thing where they could go to a local provider. I know that comes up a lot. Even just recently, I volunteer a lot with We Are the 22. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that organization, but we do direct suicide intervention. So, like, if someone in rural Arkansas is suicidal, we will actually launch a veteran who's trained in intervention out to that person. So it's like a peer-to-peer support situation. Um, that I think I wish there were more things like that and that had more support. I think that is something that we need to go toward. I feel like we have to be proactive.
All right. I tell you what, I hate to do this. 12:30. I got to take a quick 2-minute break. Hey, Trent, can you hang on, or you got to get on the road?
I can hang on for just a little bit longer, and I know you're on time break, so we can talk a little bit longer after the meeting.
All right.
After the commercial, excuse me.
All right, we're going to go to break. Thanks to the sponsors, the Everett GMC Buick down in Saline County, Baxley, Penfield, Mouty Real Estate, and also Edwards Food Store and Edwards Cash Savers. Appreciate them, because without them, couldn't be on the show and on the air. And this is Kim Hammer Show. We'll be back in just a minute after this break.
This week in the Town Hall Review with Hugh Hewitt, brought to you in partnership with the Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy. The Senate hearings for Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court left Democrats grasping. Senator Ben Sasse gives them a civics lesson.
This is supposed to be the apolitical branch.
Join us for our program and sign up for our podcast at townhallreview.com.
Town Hall Review with Hugh Hewitt, Saturdays at 7 a.m. on 101.1 FM. The Answer.
As a kid, did you have a paper route? Did you babysit, set up a stand and sell lemonade, cut lawns in your neighborhood? You're an entrepreneur. New Era Health Plans is looking for entrepreneurs. If you work hard, are always learning, and enjoy helping and educating people, this may be a good fit for you. New Era Health Plans offers people superior non-Medicare health insurance with savings up to 30 to 60%. They'll train you and help you become a successful licensed insurance agent. If you're already an agent or a top salesperson in your company not making what you should, or someone ready for a career change, you need to call New Era at 855-296-4500. That's 855-296-4500. Take a leap, invest in yourself, and build a legacy business for your future security. Make the money you deserve, working how you want to work, all while you're truly having an impact on people's lives. Go to newerahealthplans.com to request a phone interview now.
This radio station accepts political advertising. In fact, we are required to do so by the federal law. We understand that not all our listeners will agree with statements or positions taken by all of these candidates, and sometimes neither do we. But this radio station is an important part of this community, and therefore the candidates want to bring their message to you via our airwaves. We do so as a public service, and we are required to do so, regardless of your position on these issues. Please make sure you register to vote so your voice is heard.
Do you need to read?
Welcome back to the Kim Hammer Show on a beautiful Saturday afternoon. Thank you for joining us. We've got Senator Trent Garner on the line, who is campaigning from down in El Dorado. And Trent, you mentioned that tour you were doing as far as talking about the needs around the state. And I actually attended the one that was down at El Dorado. That may have been your first or your second one. And it was an excellent format to get people the opportunity to talk, especially those that are directly impacted. So I want to commend you for getting that together and that task force. It is a good thing. My other guest today is Angela Campagna. All right, very good. And she is actually working with veterans as a master licensed social worker.
Yes.
Okay.
A licensed clinical social
Licensed
worker.
clinical social worker. Okay. Mentioning about VA and some areas maybe we can improve the rural thing. Let me ask you, any other suggestions you have for Senator Garner or myself that we would look at? And then Senator Garner, I'm going to come to you.
Well, I would say one thing is you might, if you haven't already, talked to Congressman French Hill. He has been an amazing advocate for veterans in his district. He actually even started a support group for female veterans, which I've never seen or heard of in my life. And I got to be a part of that just a couple of weeks ago because we are lacking in being proactive with our female veterans and military sexual trauma across the board. But I think that doing like he's doing, he's hired some veterans. David Carnahan, I think, is his head of that. And having those veterans in the office, and then like the two of you being open to talking to me and talking about veterans issues are very important. But I think if we can get other people on board like Congressman French Hill's doing, I think that would really be helpful.
Trent, what about you? Some things you see that we need to work on to help with veterans other than what you mentioned, or some things you see that are going in the right direction we need to continue to support?
let me parrot some of the things that Angela said. The peer-to-peer groups of the nonprofit sector is so vitally important. We are 22, came and spoke to us when we were in Cabot. Michael does a great job, and that's kind of the incentive for that $5 million and how that got structured. But the number one thing, this is something you hear a lot, but in veterans issues, it actually really, really matters, is awareness. Now, that's thrown around cliche a lot, but the point behind this in this context is we found out from the studies we've seen that roughly only 4 out of the 10 veterans commit suicide are actually using the VA services they could be using. What's that telling us? There's a huge gap right now between what is offered and veterans either A, knowing about the programs, or B, using them. So if we're able to make that connection between existing programs, especially with the Veterans Affairs, who've gotten much better the last few years, they still have problems, and people can talk about specific issues, but the Veterans Affairs program for PTSD, for being able to handle injuries, has gotten much better under the leadership of people like Congressman Hill and others around the state of Arkansas. And it's very important that we use those resources. So that's another part of that $5 million, is to actually make those connections so veterans make that connection early. They're able to get those resources. And if we do that, we find the success rate to stop suicide dramatically increases.
All right. I know you're on the campaign trail. Anything you want to share before you have to get back out there shaking hands and kissing babies and all the things we do?
Yeah, the thing I always say to people right now, I mean, I'm here in South Arkansas. You know, some people listening may or may not be in my district. But when you're a veteran, you need help, that doesn't matter to me. My personal cell phone is 870-818-9219. I understand. I went through it. I'm a combat veteran. If you ever need me or you ever need help, you've heard my name. You've got my phone number, 870-818-9219. You call me. If I can't help you, I'll at least try to find somebody that can. And thank you so much, Kim, for allowing me to say a few words. And thank you so much for Angela, for all that you do to help veterans in Central Arkansas.
Very good. Thank you, Senator Garner, out on the campaign trail. He is running to hold his Senate seat. I would encourage you strongly, if you're listening. I know that the radio signal does get down into his district toward the Sheridan area, and that way, of course, you watch on a Facebook Live, would strongly encourage you to consider supporting Trent Garner. You heard his background. He is a very strong advocate for veterans and the work that he's doing, especially helping secure that $5 million that's going to be directly impacting the care and the mental health of our veterans, who we need to be supporting, because, in my opinion, if it wasn't for the veterans, we wouldn't be here in the free society that we're in, so we need to support them all the way. Let me touch on one thing, Angela, because you mentioned a while ago, and I don't mean to sound sexist and all that kind of stuff, but you can bring a unique perspective with your personal experience and everything. The challenges that women face in the military and the things they have to deal with from mental health issue versus the things that men that serve in the military that have to deal with mental health issues, both during the time they're serving, but when they come out. What are the similarities and what are the differences?
I think that there are a lot of similarities, but I think there's still some sort of a negative stereotype with female veterans. I know female veterans tend to have more trouble getting jobs when they come back out. We develop a lot of leadership and strong skills in the military, and I think coming back into the private sector, that sometimes that can be almost too intimidating, if that makes sense. Sexual harassment in the military, we know, has been a huge thing. That's nothing new. You're usually outnumbered by men. There has been recent things about, now social media, posting photos of women, derogatory nicknames of women, and sexual assaults. It's not uncommon for women to come to me that have survived, military sexual trauma. I myself am a survivor of military sexual trauma, and I have a podcast on that if anyone's interested in that. We can compare it to the private sector, which I'm so glad, like the private sector and the whole Me Too movement has, I think, let us as military women speak a little bit more freely about it as well. But the power and the control is so different. So when I was assaulted, I was E1 assaulted by E9. They can really destroy your life, literally. So a lot of those things it happens. I know the military. I say this even in my podcast, and I hate, it's a difficult topic, where there be like one jerk there would be like 20 brothers there to protect me. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So it's not always like this is a terrible thing. I enjoyed my experience in the military overall, but that we have to work on, and you have to constantly, as a woman in the military, do like prove yourself. You know what I mean? Over and over and over again.
So, what are the what difference do you want to make in the lives of veterans when they come to you?
Well, I want them to have some understanding, and I think, like Senator Gardner was saying, awareness. You know, a lot of them feel like they are isolated, they're alone, no one else has experienced this before, and nobody cares about us, you know, but people do care. And if you do come to your legislators and you do come out and talk to people, I've only seen open arms from everyone that I have talked to. So I say, if you have something, you know, go after it, stand up for yourself, talk to people, seek support. There are other women out there, there are other veterans out there that want to help you. I think that it's very important for them to get proper mental health care. So they need to be assessed for PTSD. When you leave the military, you're not assessed for anything like that. You're usually just discharged if you have like an obvious wound or amputation. I've had friends leave with amputated legs with PTSD from that amputation, but never assessed for PTSD. So
Why don't they do that? Are they afraid of what they'll find? Are they afraid to create a liability? They don't want to acknowledge that it exists. Why would the powers that be not do an assessment like that? Or would that be a brand that would be put on somebody that might make it harder for them to get a job later, or a stigma that would be attached to them? Or
I don't really know the answer to that, and I don't really understand that. That's been very frustrating, and that's where, like I said, my friend who had his leg amputated due to it being blown off, he didn't even get his disability. He didn't even qualify for any disability. We had to use our resources, David Carnahan, French Hill, who walked them through the whole thing. And it's such a bureaucracy that it's mind blowing to me. I don't have the answer for that. I wish it should, to me, be, you know, I know people that have gotten PTSD from boot camp. You know what I'm saying? So I think that used to be a thing, a stigma, but now I think that that has really gotten better. And most of those guys and girls then go back and get their diagnosis. A lot of them just end up coming to private people like me saying, hey, the VA says they can't test me for this or whatever. I'm like, let's do an assessment, you know? And then they can take that documentation to the VA, and then they run through their whole assessment. So I don't really have a good answer for that, but I think it's definitely something that needs to be improved.
I'm being a little skeptical here, but it's always about the money. I'm afraid that if they were diagnosed with PTSD, that it would create a financial requirement on the government. Maybe they don't want to assume, because if somebody leaves the military with a diagnosis of PTSD, does that qualify them to be able
Yes.
to be either partially or fully disabled?
Yes, it is all about, and I'm not an expert of this. The Depending on how many diagnoses you might have physically or mentally, yes, it can increase your disability percentile, which then they have to pay more money.
Hmm.
So I'm sure that is a huge factor.
Okay. Maybe that's something we'll take a look into.
Yeah.
I mean, because
Yeah.
again, if you've served in the military and you come out with a PTSD diagnosis, I've always thought it's an act of injustice that, we ask people to go over for a salary of 28,000, 32,000 a year and put their life in harm's way so that we can enjoy the freedoms back home. And then when they get back, we kind of treat them like, thanks, but that's where our obligation ends. But
Right.
the PTSD, has it become such a catchphrase that there are people that are abusing the system trying to get that diagnosis, not only in the military life, because you do private practice
Mhm.
outside the military as well.
Right.
So is PTSD a catchphrase that has become too common to where people are trying to utilize it like other things for ill gain?
So let's say, like, we talk about the word depression. Everybody might say, I feel depressed today. Okay, but that's not a diagnosable mental illness. So when it comes to mental health, we use these words a lot, like you said, I think I have PTSD or I'm depressed or whatever. That's different than having the actual diagnosis. And sometimes we think that mental health, you have cancer, it's easy, you run a test, that test tells you you have cancer or not. You can do similar assessments and tests for mental health. So when I diagnose someone for PTSD, it's not just like, oh, you were in the military and you lost your leg, you must have PTSD. It's an actual whole assessment. We use something called the DSM-5, which is similar to what the medical doctors use as the ICD-10. So it literally tells you, say for PTSD, it'll have 15 symptoms, and it'll say to qualify for the PTSD diagnosis, you must have 6 of these. I'm kind of just throwing, that's maybe not exact numbers,
Right.
because I still go back and look because I want to know, you know, if they have these qualifying conditions that state that they have PTSD, then yes, they have PTSD. There's no arguing about that or changing the story. It's a fact. It's not a yes or no because they write that book. It's our law for diagnosing.
No gray area, all black and white.
That is black and white. It's just that book, it's the DSM-5, it's the 5th version. We're always updating it. PTSD we didn't even know existed until after the Vietnam War. That wasn't even a diagnosis. Then they came up with shell shock is what they called it at first because they could just figure something's not right with these individuals. Then we got to PTSD, lots of research on that. And then even in the DSM-5, which just came out a few years ago, they have another criterion they're called acute stress disorder. So acute stress disorder, if you're in a trauma, you have all these PTSD symptoms, but it's in the first 2 months, you don't have full-blown PTSD because it usually stops. I would say like every individual coming back from a combat zone might have some of these problems. We're talking about night terrors, nightmares, hypervigilance, not being able to sleep, constantly watching your back, aggressive behavior. You might have those for 2 months, but then it starts to subside and you get back into the life, you get back with your family, you go to church, you get, a job. That goes away. So that doesn't have to stay with you. But when you are, 6 months out or a year out and you can't function or hold down a job because of these symptoms, then that's your PTSD.
So let me ask you, World War One, World War Two, the wars that occurred before PTSD became a recognized diagnosis.
Mhm.
Did it exist back in the veterans of World War One and Two, and it just wasn't paid attention? It was a different society because it was more ingrained in faith. It was more of a pick yourself up by the bootstraps, not as soft of a generation. What was the difference that it happened that Vietnam was where it came out afterwards versus World War One and Two and the preceding Korean War, the preceding ones?
Right. I don't know exactly about that, but I have some theories. During Vietnam, when people came back, this was a very complex topic. Not everybody agreed with this war. When they came back, people were spit on, and there was a lot of other traumas that led to uh,
They weren't
Pe
accepted.
they weren't accepted. Um, During the wars before, I think people handled things differently. Nowadays, if somebody just holds up in their room for a couple of weeks drinking, isolating, we've got people on Facebook watching them, everything. Hey, something's not right with this guy. This could not be safe. But I think back during, you said World War II, we weren't that involved with each other in that way. I think they might just kind of say, he was in war, he's struggling, let him do him. You know what I mean?
Right. So I guess we could come back to the word awareness. The awareness came along with the Vietnam War, complicated by the reaction that the military personnel had when they came back, which I could only imagine and I've got friends that have served in the Vietnam War, and
Mhm.
that because they were not embraced, it added another layer of insult to injury that they had to deal with when they
Mhm.
came back. Is that fair, or am I off?
That's the way I see it.
Okay.
You know, I haven't studied the exact research on that, but that's my understanding.
You go back to
Because,
school, that can be your other
yeah,
paper. They wanted you to do more, that
yeah,
could be your other paper. So,
yeah. And that's the thing with PTSD. So, well, I'm going to use, because actually a lot of people that I work with is not necessarily combat trauma. Like a lot of those guys, and we are the 22, they have your combat trauma. But if you take combat trauma and you say, boom, big explosion, boom, they've got PTSD. That's not how actually PTSD works. PTSD works by shooting different types of hormones and adrenaline through your body. And so, really, what happened is they got a burst of that fight or flight when they found out they were getting deployed. They got a burst of that flight or fight when they know they're going on a patrol, or then another burst when their friend gets killed. Then it keeps adding and bursting in their body, and then boom, big explosion, PTSD. So it accumulates, if that makes sense. And that's why, especially now with the Iraq war, if that's still the right proper term, but the more recent wars are being deployed over and over and over again, that it brings the chemicals. See how trauma is processed. Like we're using the cognitive part of the brain. In the amygdala, the part of the brain which is sort of closer to the base of the spine is where fragments of trauma are stored. What happens in those fragments, that means sight, sound, colors, textures, anything. These get triggered and they bypass the cognitive part of the brain and they go into the body, which is that sensation that we often call fight or flight. But it might feel like anxiety, fear, anger, aggression, but it's those chemicals and hormones being pushed through the body. So the body can only handle that so many times. That's why my theory is the best way to cure PTSD is prevention. You know, you can take two soldiers who go through the same bombing experience, same deployment. One might have PTSD and the other one not. And the research shows if you go and you look at their background, the one likely that didn't get the PTSD didn't have prior traumas, didn't have childhood trauma, had a good family, faith system, etc., etc. But when they've already had trauma in childhood, like some of these kids that we're talking about, and then they get more and more trauma, that's when you get your PTSD.
okay. And I'm not wanting to straighten me out. We're just having a conversation
Sure.
here, but just something went through my head when you said that. You know, a lot of people see the military as an escape from traumatic situations in
Mhm.
life,
Yeah.
especially if they're in, troubled homes or they're wanting to escape the environment they're in. They see the military as an option. Is that a fair statement?
I
I know
believe
that's not
that's fair.
100%.
No, I think that's a very fair statement. It's not everyone, you know what I mean?
Right,
But that is a big, yeah.
right. I don't want to cast a blanket on everybody, but
No.
when you said that, I thought, well, for maybe kids that have a troubled home environment, they've got a bad family environment,
Mhm.
or they're just looking to escape whatever.
Yeah.
If they are deployed then and they go through exactly what you said,
Mhm.
they're kind of behind the eight ball before they ever get started. If that's what you say triggers the PTSD, it could be a contributing factor. Is that a fair analysis or not?
That is a fair analysis, and I think that now that the military is better at screening for that. I think they do try to screen for that. If they've
Screen to prevent them from coming in, or just screen to know that it's there so they can, as you said, help that person succeed if they come in from that environment?
Well, I don't really know the details. I know that when I went through and did my screening for the military, nothing really mental health was even brought up. It's my understanding now that they do because I have clients that do want to join the military, and before they join, they'll ask for records from their therapist to kind of see what their mental status is. So I think that that is something that the military is trying to improve on.
Okay.
But it's very like my brain as a social worker doesn't like that because I believe if they are supported in the right way and get the right treatment, they can still be successful. That part is subjective. You know what I mean? Nobody can say that they're going to get deployed to this place and then this specific bombing is going to cause them to have PTSD.
Right. They shouldn't be disqualified before they ever have a chance to prove themselves, and with the right support, they can push through that.
Yes.
I've only got about 5 minutes left, and I do want to get you to come back on the show if you don't mind. Now, you've got a
Sure.
podcast.
I
Tell us about the
do.
podcast real quick.
It's Crazy Talk Podcast.
How'd you come up with that name?
It's kind of a crazy story. So my former partner, who was also a veteran, he came up with the podcast called Talking Crazy. And him and I were moving on this so fast and not communicating well. And I bought the domain Crazy Talk Podcast. And then a week later, he's like, no, I want it to be Talking Crazy. I was like, too late now. We own the domain. But we wanted to have something kind of shocking. And we knew we wanted to talk about sort of controversial topics, stuff that other people were telling us that it was crazy to talk about. So we just went with it.
Okay.
And
it worked.
here we are. It's worked. We've got close to 3,000 followers now. We are getting better at with our guests. We had Jason Rapert on last time. We've had Congressman French Hill. We've had tons of doctors and medical professionals because our goal is just to get the facts out there and break stigma,
Maybe you need to get Trent Garner on there.
I would love to have him on there.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. One other, I want to have you back on because the one area we didn't get today was, and if we could do this the next couple of weeks, there's a real mental toll being taken on the part of people. In fact, I was every Saturday morning, I go to visit one of our church members with her husband who's been quarantined since March, can't get into the nursing home. And it has really taken a mental toll both on the caregiver or both. Well, it gives a mental toll on the family member. It gives a mental toll on the resident, but there's also the mental toll that's being taken on the staff as well.
Oh, yes.
And if you would be willing to come back on in the next couple of weeks, we'll have a show where we'll talk about that because I get calls now pretty consistently from constituents saying, I want to get in and see my loved one.
Yeah.
They know there's a risk, but also I know from talking from a friend of mine who's a activity director at an assisted living, she said she's watching her residents go down faster than they ever were before COVID. So would you be willing to come back on and talk about that?
I totally would. That's something very important that people need to know about. And yeah, I would love to talk with you about that.
Okay. All right. So I got 3 minutes left. Give me 1 minute or minute and a half. You mentioned faith a while ago. You mentioned that you're a member up at St. Joseph, a church with a long, rich history in Conway. You're a social worker. And I know sometimes when social workers go through school, depending on which school they go through, they can have their thought processes tweaked a little bit from society's perspective. How do you balance being a social worker and faith in the same conversation when you're dealing with somebody that comes to you?
So when I have a client that comes to me, that whole time is for them. It's not my space. So I let them use whatever tool they need to help them be successful. So if they're Muslim, they're Jewish, they are atheists, whatever, that's totally fine for me. My job is to help them, if that makes sense. I use my faith for myself and my family, but I think everyone has a right to choose that, if that makes sense. Now, I'm going to let them know, especially in Arkansas, there are so many supportive religious organizations and churches.
Okay, very good. My guest today has been Angela Campagna, and she's 9 years in the military as a Marine. I want you to know, so don't mess with her. She might take you down, okay? And Trent Garner, Senator Trent Garner, joined me on the campaign trail from El Dorado. I was glad to have him on today. A big supporter of veterans, helped secure $5 million in funding in order to go directly to help veterans. And so I want to say thank you to him for coming on the show today. Again, the name of your podcast, Angela, is Crazy Talk?
Crazy Talk Podcast,
All right. And you got a website?
We have a website, crazytalkpodcast.com, and we are on every Apple, every podcast site.
Okay, very good. And one last thing. Did you get a special recognition today?
Did I?
Or tomorrow in the paper?
Oh, yes.
Quickly?
Yes. Voted for Faulkner County's best counselor. Yeah. I have a thank you coming out in the Log Cabin Democrat today.
Very good. Congratulations on
Thank
that
you.
appointment. And if people want to reach out to you, give them a quick reach out number, or what do you want them to?
Yeah, 501-514-0417. You can find us on Facebook or go to face-to-facetherapy.com.
Very good. All right. This has been the Kim Hammer Show today. Thank you for joining me. Thank you from our sponsors, Everett GMC Buick, Baxley, Penfield, Mighty, Edwards Food Stores. We're going to have a beautician on next week. We'll talk about how they've been impacted by the COVID shutdown. So get your stylists together and get them to listening. Kim Hammer Show.
101.1 FM. The Answer. KDXE FM. Kamak Village, Little Rock. A Salem Media Group station. 101.